1.
Good morning. Welcome to the Hillsborough County Commissioners Land Use Meeting on June 7th, 2022. I'd like to welcome everyone, and if everyone will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be followed by the invocation given by our chaplain. Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask that everyone please stand at this time. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Heavenly Father, generation by generation, you trust us with this finite resource of the land here on this earth that we'll be dealing with policy matters on today, and pray that you will guide this board, our staff, and stakeholders as we make these important decisions, not only for today, but for the future. And as always, I pray for our armed forces and our first responders. Pray that you'll guide them and keep them safe each and every day. I ask for these blessings in your heavenly name. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner White. With that, I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call.
Good morning, Commissioner. Silverman?
Here.
Cohen?
Here.
Hagan?
Here.
Kemp?
Here.
Myers?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
White?
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll recognize Mr. Grady.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Grady, Hillsborough County Development Services. I'll go through the changes, corrections, and additions, and then withdrawals, continuances on the agenda. The changes to the agenda, the first one is on page 9, item B10. This is the application for the Triple Creek Boulevard extensions, sections 2, phase 1 and 2. Changes are made to correct a typo on the first page of the report regarding the amount of the warranty bond. The correct amount is $202,660. It inadvertently was referred to as $20,660. So again, a revised report correcting that typo has been submitted. The second change is on page 11 of the agenda, item C2, application V21-0014. This petition is out of order and is being continued to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting at 9 a.m. The next change is on page 11 of the agenda, item E1, application, special use application LE 21-1224. This application has been withdrawn by the applicant. Next change is on page 13 of the agenda, item F1, application RZPD 21-0110. Some updated revised applicant proposed conditions have been added and submitted into the backup. And then the final change is on page 14 of the agenda, item F2, application major mod, application 22-0169. The applicant is requesting a continuance of this application of the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting at 9 a.m. That's the changes to the published agenda. I will now go through the published withdrawals and continuances beginning on page 3 of the agenda. The first item is item A1, rezoning PD 18-0996. The applicant streetfront commercial properties. The staff is requesting this item be continued to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting. Next item is item A2, PRS 22-0523. This application has been continued by the applicant as a matter of right to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting. Item A3, PRS 22-0657. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting. Item A4, PRS 22-0730. This application has been continued by the applicant as a matter of right to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting. Item A5, PRS 22-0738. Staff is requesting this item be continued to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting. Item A6, PRS 22-0739. Staff is requesting this item be continued to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use meeting. Item A7, PRS 22-0844. This application has been continued by the applicant as a matter of right to the July 26, 2022 Board of County Commissioners Land Use Meeting, and item A8, vacation petition 21-0013. This application has been withdrawn by the applicant. That concludes all the changes to the agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grady. Do I have a motion to approve the changes?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Cohen, a second by Commissioner Myers. Clerk, please take a roll call vote.
Hilderman,
Yes.
Cullen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And as we approach the consent agenda, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, a second by Commissioner Cohen. Not seeing any other comments. Clerk, will you please take a roll call vote?
Hilderman,
Yes.
Cullen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, excellent. Do we need to take consideration of the withdrawals from consent, which you don't seem to have any, but we had other withdrawals. So if we've approved those, if we can move on, Mr. Grady?
The next item. The next item then, we'll go to the C portion of the agendas. Again,
Swear.
first item is,
And so with that, we'll
Madam
move on
Chair,
to be able
Madam-
to do the oath.
Excuse, yeah, there we go.
We'll need to take an oath for those that are planning on testifying today. If you will, please raise your right hand and be sworn in by the clerk.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes,
All right. Thank you.
I do.
Excellent, thank you very much. Mr. Grady?
The first item on this morning's agenda then is the C items. First item is agenda item C1 is vacate petition V22-00018. Carrie Allen with the Real Estate Services will present this item.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Carrie Allen, Facilities Management and Real Estate Services. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can see the map. All right. Item C1 today is vacate ID V22-0001. This is a petition by Alessandra Galostegui and Thomas and Petra Alexander to vacate a portion of a 15-foot wide unimproved platted public right-of-way within the plat of Keystone Park Colony. This is recorded in Plat Book 5, page 55 of the Public Records of Hillsborough County. The subject right-of-way runs through the middle of the property owned by Alessandra Galostegui and hinders the petitioner's ability to build on this lot. This petition is being filed in order to unify these two lots and allow for future development. The proposed vacate area is located at 16213 Dewdrop Lane within folio number 16011. This is generally lying southwest of Hutchinson Road and east of Dewdrop Lane in Greater Carrollwood, Northdale, and the vacate area consists of approximately 816 square feet. This petition was routed to appropriate departments and agencies, and there are no objections to the vacation of this portion of the right-of-way. However, Spectrum has requested the reservation of a utility easement over the proposed vacate area due to facilities located and maintained therein. Staff recommends approval of this petition request.
Thank you very much. I'm looking to see if I have anyone that signed up to speak on this item. Not seeing any at the moment. Is there anyone at Saunders that wishes to speak to this item?
The applicant's here if needed.
Excellent.
Brian Grady, Development Services, the applicant indicated he does not desire to speak unless the board has questions.
I don't see any questions from the board at the moment. What is the board's pleasure?
I'll move approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, a second by Commissioner Cohen. Seeing any comments or questions, please take a roll call vote.
Overman,
Yes.
Cullen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. Grady.
The next time we'll move to the E items is, again, as part of the changes, C2 was continued. E1 was withdrawn, so we're now up to item E2. This is PRS application 22-0733. The applicant is 18th Street Development LLC. The request is for a minor modification of planned development that's located on the west side of Bell Shoals Rd.
I know.
As shown by the graphic, the parcel is on the north of Boyette Road. The parcel is north of Boyette Road on the west side of Bell Shoals Road. Here's a close-up of the existing facility. The PD is approved for a 260 place resident community residential facility and 4 development pods. Basically, the purpose of this minor modification is to modify the general site plan and layout of the development. This graphic shown on the Elmo right now is the existing layout of the parcel. Ostensibly, the changes specifically are specifically more focused on the internal pod C, which again you can see in this one provides for a layout of multiple attached buildings, and the proposed revision is to provide for a more unified building within that pod C. I will note, the original approvals for this PD, when it was originally approved, allowed for within that area a single building or multiple buildings as a generalized building envelope. So staff is recommending approval of this because we believe it's consistent with the original approval's intent, and we are recommending approval and available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present? Good morning. You have 15 minutes.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. My name is Hong Mai. For the record, 14031 Northdale, Mabry, Tampa 33618. I am here representing the applicant who also presented here also. The applicant, the 18th Street Development, is requesting the minor modification to the previous PD 18-0100 and then PRS 19-0626. The project site is the former St. Stephen Catholic Church, located at 5049 Bell Shoals Road in Valrico. The approved PRS 19-0626 was for the community residential home type C with a maximum 220 bed. The proposed minor modification is the same 260 bed. There are some change on the site plan. Basically, the applicant and the architect team did a good job. They moved the service parking lot in the front, the trash pickup to the back. That provides more setback in the front with the retention feature. Also recognize the environmental sensitive area on the northeast corner of the site. Like Brian said, we consolidate the Pod C development with the potential one building to create a large recreation area on the east side, consisting of a larger swimming pool, the cabana, gazebo with a warming kitchen, and barbecue area with the large open air plaza. That's saving a lot of mature oak tree. That looking over the wetland conservation area and also a big retention area. Along the south property, we create a much larger separation between the building to save several grand oak, while maintain the bigger open space to take away the institution looking. The building will be consisting with the architectural rendering as provided in your backup material with the pitch group. the roof overhang, Bahama shutter, railing, and siding. Bell Shoals has recently widening under your CPI program from 2 lane to 4 lane in front of the project site, provide with the 2 brand new driveway. We submit 2 administrative variants requesting to keep the 2 existing driveway, and the county engineer find it approvable. Staff find it the PD modification request is approvable. We have reviewed the staff condition of approval and have no objection. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, your staff of the Development Services and Planning Commission, for working with us. With that, I am closing my presentation and respectfully request your approval of the minor modification. And I am happy to answer any question you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mai. I appreciate that. With that, I'm not seeing anyone signing up for proponent or opponent testimony for this item.
There's no one in the audience.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll turn it over to Development Services.
Brian Grady, Development Services, we have no additional comments.
Excellent. So with that, I would take a consideration of motion of approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Cohen, a second by Commissioner Kemp and White. With that, clerk, if you'll take a roll call vote, please.
Overman,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Mai. Your item was approved. Mr. Grady, you're recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, the next item is agenda item E3, PRS application 22-0822. The applicant is MG3 Riverview LLC. The request is for a modification to the existing plan development to modify entitlements and the site development layout associated with approved school on the site. I'll go to the AMLO to orient to the area and show the changes in the site plan. Again, the parcel is located east of I-75 at the northwest corner of Fern Hill Drive and Symmes Road. As you can see from this aerial, portions of the school have already been constructed with parking lot and stacking serving that facility. The applicant is proposing a reduction as part of this modification in order to reduce parking and stacking associated with the required number of students, is reducing the high school grades by 200 in order to facilitate a reduction in the required stacking and parking associated with the school for the second phase of the project. Again, this is existing approved site development plan. As you can see, the larger parking area, the proposed building and play fields. Again, the applicant is reducing the number of students, thereby reducing the size of that area and also the required stacking to accommodate the stacking on site for the number of students proposed for this facility. Staff is recommending approval and available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I will ask for the applicant to make the presentation.
Good morning. Chris McNeil, representing the applicant, address 15957 North Florida Avenue in Lutz, Florida. Again, the request is reduce the overall student count by 200 high school students. I have 2 exhibits I can show you just to kind of further highlight the area that we've modified that may be of interest to see. I'll put them on the. This is the approved area that we're looking to modify. The green area is identified as recreation, and the gray is the parking and queuing. And this is the proposed exhibit. Here, basically, the same thing where the recreation area is just expanded somewhat and offsetting just to be able to use that parking area that has been removed to the north of the gray area. The gray area is just reconfiguration for the queuing and parking that would be associated with fewer students. Also to note here, just not to, so it doesn't get missed, is north of that parking area, we also are showing event parking as well, which is shown on the event parking plan and the plan package. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have, I believe, one person signed up to speak to this, but that may have been you. I don't see any position or proponents. So with that, we'll move to Development Services.
I think we do have one person. Do you want to speak, sir?
You'd like to speak?
I think there's a gentleman who does want to speak. He's coming to the dais.
Okay, thank you.
I am Robert Alderman. I have the adjoining property south of the existing school, and I've got 24 years in the United States Navy, retired, and 20 years and 1 day on the Tampa Fire Department. And I've lived at that location for 30 some odd years, 35 years. And there's a problem there. I'm not opposed to this, any of this. Reduction is better. I'm not opposed to it. My wife is not, of 63 years, is not opposed of it. But every day, I go out to get the mail, there's a state trooper required there to let the traffic in and out. And I understand the growth problem. But the traffic in the morning, when the kids are in the car, they meander at the school through a maze to get out. And there's a trooper there in the morning when just the parents are in the car or the driver. In the evening, and I understand that they're let out at different hours and it's not quite as bad as it is in the morning when everybody's going to work and traffic's backed up from 41 to 301. I have no trouble getting out of my driveway. My driveway opposes the school exit driveway. But my problem is, my point is that you need to put a light there instead of a state trooper. The state trooper is not there in the afternoon. And all the ladies and all the men drivers are on cell phones telling their husbands or wives that they're on the way home. And there's a bottom there that the former administrator, the female administrator, kept a low profile on the bridge. The cars pop up. The westbound traffic cannot see the cars, and they pass in either direction and hit head on. There's been 5 deaths there since I've been living there, head-on collisions. And my concern is you need to carry this further, save the little kids. The little kids are in the car when the trooper's not directing traffic. I know there's a 20-mile-an-hour school zone. They don't observe it. If you don't believe what I'm telling you, come out there. I put the car parts leaning up against my fence so everybody can see them, the parts that the wreckers leave. I've seen enough death in my life. I need to live in peace, and this growth is just about to kill me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions? I'm willing to try.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your service, and thank you very much for your comments. I'm going to recognize Commissioner White, who's got his hand raised.
I'm not opposed to growth at all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this gentleman does not seem opposed to the matter at hand here, and I'll be casting my vote based upon the record with respect to that. But Mr. Grady, I would like to see if you have an appropriate staff member in the room that can sit down with this gentleman and just gather his thoughts on the need for maybe signalization or issues with the speed limit through the area. Everything that he's mentioned, I'd like to see if a staff member can just capture those thoughts and see if we can keep him updated as to whether or not there are any existing plans or whether or not his feedback might cause us to perhaps rethink some plans in the area.
Thank you, Commissioner White. I agree. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Yes, I'd just like to thank the gentleman, and again, thank him for his service, but thank him for his service coming in this morning and reciting this to us. I think it's one of the most persuasively presented and compelling descriptions of what occurs, I think, frequently. Maybe not with so much, it sounds like fatalities and crashes as in that area, but I think frequently these situations demand a stoplight rather than any of the things that we're doing, rather than a trooper placed there all the time or just letting it just happen. So that is that particular place from that description, so well put and documented, sounds to me like it is desperately in need of attention. And I just want to assure, I know he's been assured now, but we will keep on top of that and look into that. We hear frequently that these require what are called warrants that are justified by the conditions on the road. This sounds like we already have almost our evidence of conditions that would justify a warrant and justify a light. And I think he's, often I think people believe that what they need is a widening, when what really is needed is a light that will keep things safer. So thank you so much for your service, both for all those years in the Tampa Fire Department and in the U.S. Navy, but also your service to the county and coming in and letting us hear about this dangerous condition, because I believe your testimony today will save lives in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Kemp. I too would like to ask staff to work with the school board as well as our transportation departments to take a look at this option and report back to the board any opportunities to improve the safety. Having 5 crashes in front of a school is not appropriate, in my opinion. Commissioner Smith, you're recognized.
Yes, you were saying to work with the school board, and I noticed that this is a charter school. And like all charter schools, we get no comment from the school district or the school board. Is that correct? Just to confirm, Mr. Gormley?
Generally, they provide their comments on projects that are going to cause residential level development. Yes, correct.
So a charter school can come in and do, they have a lot more freedom than a public school to do whatever they want to do for a while and then sell the property and let the kids find a home in our public schools as soon as they're done making their money on the property. So I wonder, we're having some other, and I too thank Mr. Alderman for coming in and want to assure him everybody here believes every word he said. And understands the problem and wants to look into it. But I wonder if we might look into the bigger issue of having a report come to us, maybe at another land use meeting, of how traffic lights and warrants are actually permitted and what the criteria is, because this is not the only intersection where we're getting constituents telling us the intersection is dangerous and they would like to see a traffic light, and we refer that to staff. But I think it's getting to be about time we should understand a little bit more about how that works at some future meeting. Would that be all right? Or do you need a motion? Okay.
We don't need, sorry.
All right, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Yes, and it's a great point that Commissioner Smith brings up, because if Mr. Alderman hadn't been here this morning, we wouldn't know this information. We have, this was an opportunity in our report maybe to look at this. I just don't know what, it seems like a problem here that we have, that we may not have the good information. We wouldn't have had this when it started, when the school was first opened. But I'm wondering about, I'm just even thinking about a few years later, looking into these. I don't know if this intersection here maybe is a hotspot on our Vision Zero list as well. It might be. I'm not sure. It sounds pretty, a pretty dangerous area. So I'm just wondering, if Mr. Alderman had not come in, do we have other areas like this in the county, and how do we spot them, and how do we know? Because he really, I'm just really impressed that he came in to say that, not to oppose what was happening, not because, but, not because he had an answer to this, but just to make this board aware. And I just think it's really important that that happens. But I wonder if what mechanism there is if he hadn't chosen or couldn't come in this morning to report this, because it sounds like something that is really important for us to follow up on.
Thank you, Commissioner Kemp. I'm assuming we're going to hear back from the staff on this item, as well as the future opportunity to discuss when we find that some of these developments do create a different scenario than once was evaluated when we first approved the project. Mr. Grady, we'll hear from Development Services now.
Brian Grady, Development Services. Staff is speaking with the gentleman and get his contact information and get a complete list of his concerns, and certainly be following up on the status of his concerns with appropriate staff. I have nothing further to add at this time.
With that, I don't see that we have an applicant rebuttal at this point. It's necessary. And with that, do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second. Motion by Commissioner White, second by Commissioner Myers. Please, clerk, take a roll call.
Overman,
Yes.
Helen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Mr. Grady.
The next agenda item is agenda item E4. It's CDD application 22-0551 petition to establish the Waterset South Community Development District. This petition has been submitted by NNP South 2 LLC to establish the Waterset South CDD. The Waterset South CDD will encompass approximately 758.88 acres and is located west of I-75, north of 19th Avenue Northwest, east of US 41, and south of State Tomato Road in the South Shore area, east of Apollo Beach. No objections to the proposed CDD were raised by renewing agencies. Staff finds the application meets the requirements of Chapter 190 Florida statutes to establish the Community Development District and recommends approval. Available for any questions. Thank you.
This is a public hearing. I do not see anyone signed up to speak to this item.
The applicant is present for questions if you have any.
Excellent. Would the applicant like to address any? But I'm not seeing any questions or any hands raised from the board at this time.
They've indicated they're available for questions, but don't need to give a presentation.
Okay, excellent. Board, Commissioner Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I have some qualms about this, and I'll ask the applicant to address this first, give them a chance to explain this to me or to the board. The way I understand this, this item, it will let the applicant save on future CDD application fees and streamline the process next time if they come back to expand the CDD further. But it is also, in some way, reducing the things that the county can consider in approving the expansion later. And so if we approve this now, we are, as a board, limiting the things we can consider in future applications to expand the CDD. It's my understanding that the county typically reviews and approves CDDs by ensuring that the amenities and the infrastructure can actually be funded by the CDDs, that's a practical, expectation that once we approve it, they will be able to provide the amenities and infrastructure that they're promising. But the statute allowing these expansion zones now reduces the review and analysis we can do before approving the next expansion. I'm concerned because I've lived through the last housing bubble, and I'm looking forward knowing that that's not the last housing bubble. And when that happened around in the 2008, there were several large developments around South County that had a few. It was like musical chairs. The first few people who had gotten in were left holding the bag while nobody else was moving in because the bubble burst. And now they're there having to carry the full cost of the promised streets and lights and swimming pool and common area and parks, and all of that really deteriorated around them in these big ghost town subdivisions. And so, I just want to make sure that we are not giving up right here any ability to fully review for future expansions of CDDs with an understanding of whether or not they can. It's fiscally practical and probable that they'll be able to provide the amenities and infrastructure. I'll ask the applicant to address that first before I ask staff to maybe follow up.
Yes, good morning, Commissioner. My name is Alyssa Wilson. I'm with the law firm QTAC Ropp, representing the petitioner. And to address your question, yes, this is a relatively recent statutory change that allows this streamlined process for identifying expansion areas that are sufficiently contiguous lands, which the petitioner anticipates adding to the boundaries of the district within 10 years after the CDD establishment. It then lays out a particular process in the statutes for identifying those areas and the exhibits that are necessary to be provided to the county to evaluate the expansion area. It does nothing to change the development approvals required for the density or development within those areas. That will all still come back to you as a county to review and approve at a later date when the petitioner as landowner will submit that information.
Okay, thank you. I'm not hearing anything that eases my mind about whether we are limiting ourselves more than we need to limit for future consideration. Mr. Gormley?
So Commissioner, I believe that this conversation revolves around the expansion area, this is the first CDD that has a future expansion area identified that this board has seen. This is something so when we look at CDDs now, one of the things we do is we do a review of the cost to develop the project and the proposed financing plan for the CDD, so what percentage of the infrastructure costs would be funded by the CDD. We do that to provide the board information and to support the criteria of whether a CDD is the best avenue to finance the proposed infrastructure. With the expansion area, our ability to do that or to require that level of information is perhaps unclear at this time. The statute the Chapter 190 has changed to allow that an applicant can identify a future expansion area that they expect to develop within the next 10 years. We did ask the applicant for the information on the expansion area in terms of what the infrastructure plan is and what the financing plan. They did not have that information yet. They indicated that this was still early on in their planning, and we're not able to commit to that at that point. I will say that the expansion area is not actually in the CDD. It's not an area that would be subject to the CDD, but the statute does provide for a streamlined process of including that area in the CDD in the future. And so what it does at that time is it would require the applicant to describe the development proposed for that area and submit a petition to include it as an expansion to the CDD. Whether the statutory criteria that applies to the formation of a CDD would also apply to the addition of expansion area, I think it's not clear that it does. The applicant has argued, or has put a legal argument forward that the way that they're proceeding today is consistent with the legislative intent and change in Chapter 190 to set the table for future expansion areas. So in terms of again, our review really focuses on is this the best financing mechanism for this development, and that's where we typically will have the infrastructure cost, the amount of financing, and it lets us bring the board information on the percentage of that cost that would be proposed to finance with the CDD, and that we factor that into the recommendation on whether it meets the statutory criteria. So that's a long way around to say, it appears that the intent was to allow those the legislative intent was to allow those expansion areas to be included with a perhaps a different standard of review than is required for the formation of a CDD. And we did vet that with the applicant, and they provided a legal memorandum that did support that's what the statutory change was intended to bring about.
Thank you. And yet they are not, of course, providing the full financial information that they would if they didn't have this, expansion area given to them up front now. And they want to expand it into this and include it into the CDD anytime in the next 10 years. And yet, so we don't have that information now, and we'll have less information then than we would if we didn't do this expansion business, is what I'm hearing. And given that I think the market looks a little risky, and as I say, I've seen how that's played out in crashes before. I don't want to give up any of our ability to review a CDD at the time, or review things at the time of an expansion, to make sure that our constituents that are left there are not going to be holding the bag in any way, or that we won't have to come in and provide infrastructure. I guess we don't do that. No, they're just
private
infrastructure. But nevertheless, I'm not going to support this. hear from the rest of the board to figure out whether I'll make a motion to deny or if I'll just be voting against the majority who wants to.
Commissioner, if I may.
Yeah.
Just one note, and I would like to point out that the county, I know that this is the first one that you all have considered with this new expansion parcel language, but I think it would be likely that as you guys review this process moving forward, interpret potentially the description of the development to also require description of funding of that development as well, if you would like to see those items at the expansion parcel submission. That I would leave to you to discuss with your county staff and county attorney, but I think that would be a reasonable interpretation under the new statutory language that may satisfy your concerns.
And thank you, but we don't have that today on this. If they were to bring this back, Mr. Gormley, is there a waiting period? I mean, would it be better to continue to let them provide that, or?
I was just going to suggest that, because I think what was just put on the record is additional consideration and additional perspective from the applicant team than what we've had. So I would.
I'll move to continue it.
Second.
I'll second. No.
Oh, excuse me.
No, you're done. I'll move to continue it to a date that, which would be?
July 26th at 9 a.m.
July 26th at 9 a.m.
Excellent. So we have a motion by Commissioner Smith, a second by Commissioner Kemp and Cohen. Commissioner Cohen, you had your hand up. Did you have a comment?
I was actually just going to suggest going in the same direction that Commissioner Smith did. So that's why I support it.
Okay. All right. That's fair. I did have some concerns about the estimated costs in the future, given we're seeing significant differences. So I think coming back with some additional information would not harm the opportunity to move forward. With that, we'll take a roll call vote, seeing no other comments.
Overman?
Yes.
Cullen?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, board. With that, we'll move on. Mr. Grady? Mr. Grady?
Commissioners, I'll introduce the next item. The next item is E5. This is the second of two required public hearings for a development agreement among the county, the Hillsborough County School Board, and Lennar Homes. This agreement is to support two rezoning applications that the board approved last May. And the agreement is to support primarily a 3-campus school on Westlake Drive. It will consist of pre-K through 12. The agreement is a cost-sharing agreement between Lennar and the school district for improvements to support the school site directly. It'll serve as a proportionate share agreement for the Lennar project to satisfy school concurrency, and also as a mobility fee alternative satisfaction agreement that will allow several Lennar projects to contribute toward their mobility fees towards an improvement of the intersection of Westlake Drive and 674. That will include widening and adding lanes and adding a signal to that intersection. We in review of the school, found that improvement was necessary to support the school campus. This agreement does have one correction of a scrivener's error from the version that was before the board last meeting that misidentified one of the 71-unit Lennar projects that would be contributing to the Mufasa. So this agreement does have an addendum that removes those 71 units and adds another 71 units within the same mobility fee zone. Again, this is the second of two public hearings, and it's in order for the board to act to approve following a public hearing. Available for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a public hearing, and I don't have anyone signed up to speak to this item. And with that, I will take board comment and consider
Move
a motion.
approval.
Move approval by
Second.
Commissioner, second by Commissioner Kemp. With that, we'll take a roll call vote.
Overman,
Yes.
Cullen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Excellent. Thank you very much, board. Now we are on to the regular agenda. Mr. Grady.
The next item is agenda item F1 is rezoning PD 21-0110. The request is for rezoning from RSC2 to a planned development for a 1-acre parcel located at 11216 McMullen Road. Commissioners, this was before the board a few months ago. There was discussions that the applicant at that time requested a continuance of the application in order to potentially offer up additional restrictions and conditions to the proposal. Again, the proposal that was before the board a couple of months ago was for a 19-bed community residential home type C. The applicant has proposed some additional restrictions, which are in your backup, consisting of committing to limit the residence to senior citizens 65 years of age or older, reduce the bed count from 19 to 12, committed, and as part of that commitment to the age restriction included a condition record indicating how they would maintain records to ensure compliance with that standard. They also committed to no freestanding signs or wall signs and a 4-foot hedge to place along the parking lot frontage along McMullen Road Boulevard. They also added some additional conditions regarding transportation required improvements that were in the transportation's recommended conditions of approval. That's been the changes since the last time this was before the board. As noted in the backup, staff in our initial review did not find this supportable based on requirements for the waiver from the 500-foot separation standard from residentially zoned property and the increases in intensity associated with the request. Staff's available for questions if you have any comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll open it up for oral argument and limited to the parties of record. The applicant available to speak?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Todd Pressman, 200 2nd Avenue South, number 451 in St. Petersburg. I have a PowerPoint for you. If we could pull that up, please. Thank you. So this is 21-0110. It's been revised a number of times with more restrictions and lesser intensity. Next slide, please. Located in the Riverview area. Next slide. A little closer view. Next slide. This is Angel TCH. They've been in existence as an ALF for 4 years with a 6-bed ALF. They're a senior living provider with 4 other ALFs, 9 years in the business. Mr. Scott is a disabled Marine. His wife has a master's in health administration. We were seeking expansion of 12 beds under a PD. But that's been revised, if I may continue, please. This is a close-up of the site from the aerial. Next slide, please. So revised issue is 1 acre. It's RSC2 to PD. I misspoke a minute ago. We originally were in for 19 beds for a type C. We've reduced it now to a 12-bed proposed type B ALF. Next slide, please. So that's also a reduction of square footage that we made as well. Next slide, please. So we did ask conditions. Some of these were raised by the Board of County Commissioners last time we were here. Residents only 65 years or older. There'll be no signage, no freestanding signs or wall signs. We'll install a hedge along the front parking lot. We will maintain the residential character of the structure and provide a sidewalk. Next slide, please. Planning Commission notes that housing opportunities for all income groups should be maintained and that the applicant is proposing a non-residential use with residential architecture and character which would support the visions of the Riverview and South Shore community plans. Next slide. Zoning map, RSC2. Next slide, please. Future land use category, Planning Commission notes typical allowable uses in this category include residential, suburban scale, neighborhood, commercial, office uses, multi-purpose projects. Next slide, please. This is the existing site. Next slide, please. The expansion will carry through the colors, the architecture, design features that are existing on both the sides and the rear of the home. Next slide, please. So that home is now has been operating with a 6-bed ALF. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. If we could go back one, please. You're going forward. Yeah, right there. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll continue the roof feature design, window design, colors, and the humps and bumps, and it stays 2 stories. Next slide, please. So a quick look at the site plan as it's laid out in the lot. Next slide, please. This is the existing 2-story residence you saw in the picture. Next slide, please. This would be the proposed building expansion. And next slide, please. In the center would be a courtyard, which would surround the use entirely for the interior. Next slide, please. We've also met transportation concerns on the access point. Next slide, please. Very low trips obviously proposed as de minimis per your county traffic engineer, 31 trips per day, 2 a.m. peak, 3 p.m. peak. Next slide, please. Policy 1.4.3, sites for group homes, foster care facilities will be approved in areas with residential character to meet the needs of the population require such housing. The push over the many years has not to place our mothers and fathers and grandparents in sterile corporate facilities, but in the community, to be a part of the community, which is exactly what this site has been doing successfully and will be doing if approved. Next slide, please. And also from the comp plan, Hillsborough County has established comp plan policies which allow group homes in certain residential areas and areas of residential character. Again, that's from the housing element of your comp plan. Next slide, please. Goal 2, promote and assist provision of ample housing supplies, broad range of types of price levels to meet current projected housing needs. So all Hillsborough County residents have the opportunity to have standard housing. Next slide, please. Use is extremely non-impacting on a large lot. There's no exterior activity. There's no parties. There's no noise, no low and very low trips. Everything is basically interior. There's a fence and distance separation, and the home expansion will maintain a strong residential character. The rear area is natural buffering. Next slide, please. Now, it is part of a subdivision, which we have talked to, and one of the representatives is here. They've been generous in having communication. But I do want to point out that this site is located on the main road. It is not really a part of the interior subdivision. All access will be to the main road, not to the interior of the subdivision. So we don't see it having any impacts in regard to its location to the subdivision. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Again, we have the test of time operated for 4 or 5 years, as far as we know, without a single complaint until this application had been applied. Next slide, please. Again, the push from state and federal is to move our mothers, grandfathers from warehousing sterile areas into the community. And Angels has cared for 2 families from this subdivision and 6 other families in close proximity. So that is exactly what they've been doing, is taking care of residents in the immediate vicinity and in the subdivision. Next slide, please. Meets all side and rear setbacks in the RSC2 for the structure. Next slide, please. Now, this is another way to look at this, commissioners. The proposed expansion here is to the rear at the same height and same equivalence of building requirements. Next slide, please. But the maximum capacity or density, theory-wise, under the RSC2 per units per acre is 2 homes could go here per code in terms of the density and the size of the lot. That's not what's proposed, but that's another way to look at in terms of a parameter of what we're asking for. Next slide, please. Zoning staff concerns had concerns about appropriateness and intensity, separation of the use, I believe with the restrictions, and with the plan proposed, we now have addressed those. Next slide, please. Planning Commission, states compatibility does not mean the same as, but maintain the same character of existing development, including intensity of height, scale, mass, and bulk, which we are doing. Again, per the South Shore Community Plan, it does support the visions of the Riverview and South Shore Community Plans, and per Policy 17.1, residential support uses must be compatible with surrounding land uses, which, because of our change, reduction of plan and restrictions, we believe we meet. Next slide, please. So in summary, the Sefner Mango Community Plan supports it. We've been very restrictive to 65 years and older, no signs, new parking lot hedging. It's really a small increase of a non-impacting use. There are comp plan policies that support it. This site has had the test of time, and we're looking to continue and provide more support for our families in this immediate area and subdivision. With that, we appreciate your time and consideration and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. I do not see anyone signed up for this. Are there any proponents who would like to speak to this matter?
Is there anyone in person? I believe there was
There's a gentleman wishing to speak.
someone.
Excellent. Thank you. You recognize you have 10 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Scott Fitzpatrick. I'm at 811B Cypress Village Boulevard, Ruskin, Florida, 33573. I am an attorney with the Owens Law Group, and I have the honor of representing the Shadowrun Homeowners Association, Inc. here today. This HOA has 386 members who reside in the Shadowrun subdivision located in Riverview, Florida. Over 200 of my client's members have notified my client of their opposition to this application. As a result, the HOA has retained my services to represent it at hearings before the zoning hearing master and you. During Mr. Pressman's presentation, he focused on the size of the applicant's lot, which is 1 acre, and argued the applicant should be permitted to expand its commercial operation from 6 beds to 12 beds. However, Mr. Pressman did not focus on the fact that the application is part of a deed-restricted community where every lot in the community is approximately 1 acre. If the application is approved by this board, precedents would be set for other lot owners in the private community to follow in reliance upon this file. In other words, the exception sought by the applicant would be set precedent for 385 other properties in the subdivision with similar size lots. We have laws, standards, and zoning regulations for many important reasons. Because of these rules and their uniform application, citizens from around the world feel comfortable purchasing homes in Hillsborough County subdivisions. Such purchasers expect our rules will be uniformly honored and followed. Understandably, sometimes minor exceptions may be warranted from time to time. However, this application does not meet basic criteria required by the rules. For these reasons, my clients find the applicant's request to be unacceptable and ask that you do the same. During the prior Board of County Commission meeting, some of you mentioned the county has a density problem and you would like to see solutions to this problem. Generally speaking, I agree. However, granting the exception sought by the applicant is not the solution. The exception sought by the applicant will contribute and increase the problem by allowing more traffic into an already congested residential area in South Hillsborough County. The application, if granted, would pave the way for resident staff and support vehicles for 20 to 30 people at a single-family home in a residential neighborhood. Please be reminded, this application was first submitted in early 2021. Because of consistent rejections and the failure to meet county criteria, the applicant repeatedly modified the application in the hope it would eventually be granted. Even after the amendments, the county and land use hearing officer have consistently recommended denial of this application for the many reasons set forth within their reports and findings. This house was purchased as a RSC2, and surrounding neighbors purchased their homes considering this is RSC2, not a commercial facility with staff, 12 residents, a parking lot, and service vehicles. Applicant is seeking to expand the current residence to include a commercial-sized courtyard in the backyard. Per the Land Development Code's density guidelines for a community residential home, 5 beds are equivalent to 1 dwelling unit. The applicant is seeking your approval of up to 12 beds. This is double the number of beds permitted by the guidelines. In the county's report, it stated the waiver provision is in place to avoid proximities to single-family uses to minimize impacts in the character of a residential area. This straight line distance may be justified by a feature that would provide a natural barrier and restrict any impacts or interaction between a CRH Type B and a single-family home. For example, a vegetated wetland, intervening use, church, office, or major roadway. For this application, no such feature is present, and the waiver request distances are considerable at 472.5 feet to the north, 462 feet to the south, and 351.7 feet to the east. Quoting the land use hearing officer, this zoning request is not in compliance with and does not further the intent of the goals, objectives, and policies of the future of Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County. The county staff is correct. The land use hearing officer is correct. On behalf of the Shadow Run Homeowners Association Incorporated, we respectfully request that you deny the application and assist my client in preserving the Shadow Run neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other opponents or proponents that wish to speak to this item? Hearing none, we'll move to the Planning Commission staff.
Thank you, Melissa Leinhardt, Planning Commission staff. The subject property is located within the Residential 4 future land use category. The site is located in the urban service area and also located within the limits of the Riverview Community Plan and the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan. At the regularly scheduled land use public meeting on July 20th, 2021, the Hillsborough Board of County Commissioners granted the applicant's request to remand the item back to the zoning hearing master. The remand did not identify any comprehensive plan concerns or issues and has not resulted in a change to Planning Commission staff's recommendation. The development pattern along McMullen Road consists predominantly of single-family residential dwellings, a mobile home park, and a plant nursery on the eastern side of McMullen Road. Per future land use element policy 20.5, the development of congregate living facilities will be allowed within each of the land use categories that permit residential development. The proposed community residential home is allowable in the residential 4 future land use category. With a 0.99 acre site, the development could be considered for up to 19 beds, and the request for 12 beds is below the maximum density that can be permitted. Per future land use element policy 9.2, developments must meet or exceed the requirements of all land development regulations as established and adopted by Hillsborough County. The application does not meet the Land Development Code requirement of a distance of 500 feet from any area of a non-agricultural single-family zoning district for the intensity of this community residential home. In addition, policy 1.4 of the future land use element states that compatibility does not mean the same as, but rather maintaining the character of existing development, including the intensity elements of height, scale, mass, and bulk. Meeting the Land Development Code requirement ensures compatibility between the proposed community residential home and the surrounding single-family residential dwellings. This application is not consistent with policy 9.2 as the applicant does not meet the Land Development Code and is not supported by Development Services staff. The site is also located within the limits of the Riverview Community Plan and the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan. The site is located in the residential district of the Riverview area, which has been developed as primarily residential and encourages attractive residential development that complements the surrounding character and promotes housing diversity in the area. Per the South Shore Area-Wide Systems Plan, housing opportunities for all income groups should be maintained. The applicant is providing a residential support use with residential architecture and character, which would support the visions of those plans. However, given the fact that the request does not meet the LDC requirements per future land use element policy 9.2, the proposed plan development is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And based upon those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed plan development inconsistent with the future of Hillsborough comprehensive plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have to apologize. I did not give the applicant an opportunity to rebut for 5 minutes. Does the applicant wish to do that at this time before we move to the zoning hearing master's recommended summary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, Todd Pressman, again for the record. I'd like to thank Mr. Fitzgerald and the subdivision. We have had communication. We have discussed issues. I always have great respect for that. And I think Mr. Fitzgerald presented their positions very clearly. I will say in regard to precedent, I don't see this issue as creating any precedent for the subdivision. As I showed you, there are, by my count, just 7 lots out of, I believe Mr. Fitzgerald indicated there are 285 lots in the subdivision that front on the main roadway and are positioned away from the subdivision and only have access to the main road, not into the subdivision directly. On top of that are far-reaching restrictions. And over time, yes, we have modified this application as we've talked with the community and heard feedback from the Board of County Commissioners. So we've reduced the size considerably. So in regard to those elements, we don't see it as a precedent for the subdivision. Mr. Fitzgerald referred to traffic. Your traffic department specifically indicated that was a de minimis request. Obviously, ALF has a very low rate, particularly as we've reduced it to 12 beds. The Planning Commission did find different on some policies as compared to the zoning hearing master. And there are comp plan policies under the housing chapter, which the Planning Commission did not include in their report, that clearly do support this use, let alone the policy of where we are keeping our senior members. I can tell you that Mr. Scott has told me that they've had other persons from the subdivision and the immediate vicinity come to check out the home. It's very well liked in the area in terms of taking care of our seniors, but he's not been able to accommodate them. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeking forward to bring this request before you. So with that, we appreciate your consideration and your time this morning. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. We'll have the zoning hearing master's recommended summary, please.
Thank you. The zoning hearing master considered the proposed modification to the subject property's zoning. The property consists of a 1 acre approximately located on the east side of McMullen Road, south of Shadow Run Boulevard. The property is zoned RSC2 and currently developed with a 3,421 square foot, 2-story single-family home currently being operated as a 6-bed type A community residential home. The property is located within the Riverview community and a subdivision developed with low-density residential uses. Adjacent properties to the north, south, and east of the subject property are zoned RSC2 and developed with single-family homes. Properties west of the subject property are zoned AR, AS1, and ASC1 and are developed with single-family residential homes and a mobile home park. The applicant proposes an expansion of the existing single-family home for use as a Type B community residential home with a maximum of 12 placed residents. The zoning hearing master stated that the Land Development Code at Section 6.11.28 provides that community residential home facilities housing 6 or fewer residents are deemed a single-family unit and non-commercial residential use. If expanded to accommodate 12 placed residents, the subject property would not be deemed a single-family unit and non-commercial residential use under the LDC Section 6.11.28. The applicant's request is to modify the subject property to plan development to allow expansion of the 3,421 square foot home by approximately 5,668 square feet to result in a 9,089 square foot, 2-story Type B community residential home with 12 resident beds. The applicant's request involves and requires waivers of the Land Development Code's requirement for separation from RSC zone properties, including a waiver of approximately 472 feet to the north, 462 feet to the south, and 351 feet to the east. The land use hearing officer found that the requested waivers from these RSC zone properties are for significant distances, and there are no intervening uses or natural barriers such as roadways or environmental features between the subject property and the adjacent single-family residential uses to the north, east, and south. The land use hearing officer noted that county staff found the proposed rezoning is not compatible with adjacent residential uses. And as you've heard, Planning Commission staff also found the proposed rezoning does not meet all land development code regulations as required by Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Element Policy 9.2. And therefore, Planning Commission staff concluded that the request is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. The land use hearing officer concluded that the request to rezone the subject property to allow a 5,668 square foot expansion to the existing 3,421 square foot single-family home for use as a type B community residential home with a maximum of 12 beds is not compliant with the Land Development Code separation requirements from RSC zone properties and is not compatible with the adjacent residential uses. The land use hearing officer therefore recommended denial of the request.
Thank you. With that, we'll open it up for board discussion. I see Commissioner White has his hand raised. Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have recommendations of denial here. I think Mr. Fitzpatrick has done a great job of stating his case on behalf of his client, the Shadowrun Homeowners Association. So with all that being said, I'll move for denial.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And by Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Smith, you're recognized.
Yes, and you know, I have to say, I really do feel the force of the applicant's argument that it's important to put small senior homes and facilities in neighborhood settings. I was especially moved by his saying that this particular applicant has a record of serving the people right there in the neighborhood with their families nearby. I can see the importance of that, but I just can't get past the Shadowrun Homeowners Association providing their deed restrictions in the record that says certain uses of home sites are prohibited. No building at any time situated on any home site shall be used for any business, commercial, amusement, hospital, sanitarium, school, clubhouse, religious, charitable, all those purposes, a whole list of purposes, and also no building situated on any home site shall be rented or leased separately from the rental or lease of the entire property, and no part of any such building shall be used for the purpose of renting rooms therein or as a boarding house, hotel, motel, tourist, or motor court, or other transient accommodations. And, you know, I don't even know how we could approve something when the development itself has deed restrictions that spell out the prohibition of it, although I don't see that in our staff reports. Mr. Gormley?
Yes, so those deed restrictions you read are private deed restrictions, and those are things that the county does not have a role in enforcing. So they would be on top of any regulatory control that the county would have. So we consistently don't delve into the private deed restrictions for issues like that, or really any others, as they're not something that the county is a party to, nor do we have enforcement ability on
So
those.
so if we were to approve it, then the homeowners association would have to go to court and sue to have their deed restrictions enforced. And that's not something I want to have. I'd rather just stop that here. If they had, community support in light of the reduction of the numbers and in light of the record of having served the community, that would be one thing. But with the community opposition and presenting the deed restrictions that that spell out this is not supposed to be a use, along with, the land development code violation that this would be, or that this would be contrary to. I just don't see any way around it, and so that's why I feel like our only choice is to deny it. Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen, you're recognized.
So I find myself also very conflicted about this, but I think I come down on the other side of it, and I want to make a few comments to that. First of all, to the issue of precedent, I see what really distinguishes this property from the rest of the subdivision is that it's on the main road. And when it's pointed to that there's a nursery and a mobile home park on that road, that actually persuades me in the other direction, that this is an appropriate use for this type of parcel that's on the outlying area of the subdivision. So I think that for the concern that this is going to sort of open up everything inside the subdivision to commercial uses, I think that you have plenty to distinguish this from what is inside. I also, the distance waiver issue seems to be the largest one. And there are two things about this property that I noticed. The first is that the proposed modification it includes an interior courtyard. So it would seem to me that that's an attempt to minimize any sort of exterior noise or disruption. The exterior use would be in large part confined inside the walls of the exterior walls of the house. And then also it said that there was no buffer, but when I saw the photograph, it looked to me, and the applicant said that there was a natural buffer. It looked like there's a big clump of trees that are sort of in between where this house is and the rest of the neighborhood. I wanted to address Commissioner Smith's point about the homeowner covenants, because that's very, very important. My experience with those in the past has been that we are not allowed to consider those, that those are not, because they're private, they are not part of our review. And as much as I dislike the idea that the homeowner association would have to essentially pursue their rights in court, which, is unfortunate, the bottom line is that whether or not the covenants apply to this property or not is going to require more evidence to be presented than we have here. I mean, we have no idea whether this property pays dues to the homeowners association, whether or not there are all kinds of things that might come into play about whether or not these covenants cover something on the outside of the subdivision or the inside of the subdivision. And I don't feel like we're really in a position to make that determination, nor empowered to make that determination. That's my understanding of our role.
I would agree with that, and that's consistent with how we present all of these cases that have deed restrictions. There are some, there's potentially ambiguities in there. Besides the point of the county it's not binding on the county doesn't have any role or authority in that. Arguably the use that's going on there today, could be something that could be question raised under the covenants, but we're just not on that side of the curtain to be able to opine and have a role in that.
And I guess my last comment about this is that we just all recognize that there is a need for these kinds of facilities, and that it probably is better for them to be relatively close to other residential uses. And I think that the reduced size makes this, you know, a really acceptable compromise between what was proposed originally and what we're looking at now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cohen. Commissioner Smith, you're recognized.
Yes, and just to clarify, my support of the motion that is also supported by the Planning Commission and the Development Services, pointing out that this is contrary to the Land Development Code, is, you know, not based on, and I appreciate Commissioner Cohen for clarifying what our role is, and that's a really good discussion about exactly what we can and can't consider here. But I do feel like it's important to try to cite a small home such as this within a neighborhood. But you also, my sense is, you have to consider the neighborhood character, and is this consistent with the neighborhood character? And all our planners and code comes down saying no, and the community says no as well. And as they say no, they point out these deed restrictions, which are pretty clear, but without actually, you know, wading into the legal case of what they would have to prove in court beyond us. That's not where I'm at. I'm just at, they do have some actual written documentation that backs up what the attorney is claiming for the homeowners here. And so I would say, although I'm on the bubble and I feel the other side, in this case, if you had community support saying, yes, a couple of our neighbors have their grandmothers in there and we want it to continue even though the Land Development Code prohibits it, that would be one thing. But when you still have neighborhood opposition, even though it's been reduced in its use, I'm just going to have to support the county staff, the Planning Commission, and the neighbors in this case. Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. This is a hard one. I feel very unsettled about it, and I really appreciate the points made by both Commissioner Smith, but especially Commissioner Cohen. I think it's really good points to bring up. It being on the main road, and it's just been such a push to have things within communities. That's about trip capture. That's about building communities with services that are nearby and close. And I feel very committed to that. And this isn't. This is a neighborhood, in my mind, type of service, which we'll need, I think, in the future. Obviously, from our demographics, more and more and more. Probably. Every place will. So I mean, I wish we, I'd really like to not have this just, that they have it be about the community opposition. And I'm wondering if there is some community support. I understand what Commissioner Smith is saying. It's really it's an unsettling vote to face.
Commissioner Cohen, your hand is still raised. I had some comments, but I wanted to make sure I recognized you. Okay, excellent.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. I have traveled with this as well. One, we've had almost 3 years of conversation about how we look at how communities grow and address our needs to grow, the need to incorporate what was a legacy of houses only and keep all the residential community benefit services out. We've had in other communities like WBR2 and RB2 conversations about community benefits, about how there is an advantage to doing so. And we're addressing our housing element that may, in fact, if it were applied in this circumstance, be less of a challenge for the Planning Commission. And so I did want to ask the Planning Commission for at least a comment, if nothing else, based on the most recent housing elements that we are in the process of approving for the unincorporated Hillsborough County areas, in your mind, from what you have been working on so hard, and given that this is on the sort of exterior portion of this suburban neighborhood, would this, under a different set of rules, be in line with what we're trying to accomplish as far as our community's growth? Because it does appear to do exactly that. And that, at least to me, and it apparently to a few other commissioners. So I'd love to get your impression with, how it would fit with our potential comprehensive plan amendments that we're actually in the process of approving. And then, and if so, would that change the land code for these particular areas, or comp plan codes for these particular areas?
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. For the record, Melissa Leinhardt, Planning Commission staff. That is a really great question, and one that I can certainly bring up with the planners from the Planning Commission who are working on the update of the housing section. I'll leave it up to Adam to talk about the land development code issues, but ultimately with, given the requirements by the land development code and those really outlining and implementing the comprehensive plan strategies as far as neighborhood protection and compatibility is concerned, it's really something that we take the lead on with development services staff. So if something doesn't meet the land development code, which again implements the comprehensive plan policies about compatibility, we really take the lead on that, and seeing that they're not meeting the land development code requirement for the distance, and that the development services staff did not support it, that really informed our inconsistency finding. But I do think you raise a very good point that I want to follow up with my team about for the housing section, to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to encourage those residential support uses in existing neighborhoods. Again, you've all made really good points on that. So that's something that I have as a note to follow up with staff about.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I too have a tough time with this one. I would love to see this approved, and I understand it would have some challenges. It has a legacy of NIMBY associated with the way the suburban communities were grown for a long time. It's just, I don't want these kinds of things in my neighborhood, which I have a very hard time with a lot. But there's also, that is a suburban community. And it sounds like, there are absolutely zero Airbnbs in that community. They have no desire for ADUs ever in this community. And single family home ownership on a acre is their only goal. And if they haven't updated their community plan to reflect something different, then we're sort of left with little opportunities to not find ourselves in conflict with this particular project. However, I will say this: the applicant has worked very hard to enclose any what would be considered commercial activity, other than the fact that they have expanded or were required to have, given a higher number of people there, additional parking spaces. This would technically just look like a 9,000 square foot house. I'm going to ask whoever can best answer this question: is a 9,000 square foot property house permitted anywhere in this neighborhood?
Commissioner, yes, to the extent that the lot size could support that home and meet that size home and meet setbacks, there's nothing that would prohibit a home from being constructed in that size in the surrounding RSC 2 zoning districts.
Thank you for that clarification. With that, we do have a motion. I don't see any other comments or questions. We have a motion to deny by Commissioner Smith. I've forgotten who seconded that motion.
It was Commissioner White, second by Smith.
Okay, okay, excellent. Commissioner White is a motion to deny and a second by Commissioner Smith. Clerk, take a roll call vote.
Overman?
No.
Cohen?
No.
Hagan?
No.
Kemp?
No.
Myers?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Motion failed 2-4. Chair Overman, Commissioner Cohen, Hagan, Kemp, and Myers voted no.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
board, where do we go from
I'm
here?
sorry, Chair. Motion failed 2-5.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Clerk. Okay, board, where do you want to go from here?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp to approve, a second by Commissioner Myers. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please take a roll call vote.
Overman,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
No.
White.
No.
Motion carried 5-2. Commissioner Smith and Commissioner White voted no.
Thank you very much. Our next item, Mr. Grady?
The next item is agenda item F3. It's special use, non-conforming special use permit 22-0609. The applicant's Cascrete USA. Michelle Heinrich with county staff will provide a brief overview of the request.
Good morning, Michelle Heinrich, Development Services. As stated, this is a special use permit 22-0609. This is a 25-acre site which manufactures precast and pre-stressed concrete products. The site is located on County Road 579, north of I-4 and east of I-75. The site is located in the Res 4 Future Land Use category within the Thonotosassa Community Plan area and the Rural Service area. The use was established in the 1960s when the property was zoned M1 for manufacturing. However, the zoning conformance process in the early 1990s changed the zoning and made the use non-conforming. The use was found to be legally non-conforming in 1997 under NCU application 97-0366. Per the LDC, any change, expansion, or rebuilding of a legal non-conforming use requires special use approval by the Board of County Commissioners. One expansion for this site was approved in 2002 to allow additional square footage and equipment. Today's request is for the purpose of replacing equipment. Simply put, the wet mixing process currently done by trucks running on site will be replaced by on-site equipment that does not use trucks on site. This will allow for a reduction in dust, reduction in the truck traffic on the site, reduction of track noise, and truck fuel uses. The change will not increase the equipment height or location, and most importantly, the change will not increase the capacity of the concrete batch plant. Staff recommends approval subject to proposed conditions of approval, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. This is a public hearing. And with that, we will move forward to the applicant's oral arguments. You have 10 minutes, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kevin Reale, 401 East Jackson Street. I have been sworn here for the applicant. May I share my screen?
Sure.
Are you able to see the screen?
We can. Thank you.
Okay. So, Commissioners, this morning I'm bringing what I think is a unique application before you. I'm going to try and go quickly because I think that the zoning hearing master report and the staff report really covered well, but it being unique and somewhat technical, I want to at least cover the items and so you all can have areas where we can answer questions identified. Briefly, the location north of I-4 on County Road 579. The surrounding area is large lot, residential, commercial in the purple, and the Old Taylor Road landfill in green. It's in the Thonotosassa Community Plan, which envisions commercial uses along this area of 579. History of the site, as staff explained, was established in the 1960s for the manufacture of precast and pre-stressed concrete products. This includes open storage. Open storage is fairly significant portion of the site because the concrete materials can't be stacked very high and you need trucks to move them around. So the open storage is somewhat spread out and covers a lot of acreage. What's interesting about the site is while it's over 26 acres, just over an acre is actually for building space. So, you know, your traditional measure of intensity is very low. And that's just a reality of building large concrete products like this that have to be stored on site. So the basic request is to replace concrete batch equipment, which I will summarize as saying it's loading of raw materials and mixing of those raw materials. This image here roughly shows where that is. There are other things captured in the circle, but you can kind of get the idea as you see some bins and those silos there. The reason we're here before you with this request is because, as staff noted, this became a confirmed as a legal non-conforming use in the late 90s, and then was expanded in 2002 under Section 110306J. That expansion required a site plan to be created for the legal non-conforming use, and this equipment, while it's not buildings, it's structure shown on the site plan. And the new equipment won't have the exact same footprint, so we have to come before you to amend that site plan. What is unique is that this is not a request to continue operation. This equipment, while antiquated, is from a equipment standpoint relatively easy to repair and continue operation. So this equipment could be used continuously into the future, but the applicant would like to improve the equipment, modernize it. And we'll go into those reasons, but basically it's to improve safety and efficiency on site. This is a little harder to see, but I wanted to show the site plan side by side. This is the area of the site plan that will be modified. On the site plan, it's a little silly looking because it's basically just moving around some circles and rectangles, but of course the substance is more detailed than that. I'm going to go into a slightly more detailed explanation of the request, and I have other slides that I can go into if there are questions, but I don't want to belabor this. The loading equipment stacks the raw materials into the bins, and then the silos are part of that loading process as well. The new equipment will have a stacker, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we have a radial stacker today, and it'll be replaced by this elevator stacker. The difference here being that the radial stacker carries the raw material on an incline on a conveyor, and the elevator stacker will lift it vertically. And if you can imagine, when you have loose material on an incline conveyor, there's an opportunity for dust to be spread. And so the new elevator stacker will help reduce dust on site by changing the way the material is moved. Otherwise, the loading material looks like the largest change in the site plan, but has a smaller impact than the mixing equipment. The mixing equipment is simply the area underneath the existing silos here, and then shown here in this rectangle. The mixing equipment, there's two processes that happen on site. One of them is for a kiln process that casts materials using heat, and that mixing process will be largely unchanged. That's not what we would, as non-concrete experts, consider to be what we typically see. Everyone's used to seeing a concrete truck pouring, wet concrete into a site. The kiln process, it's more like a Play-Doh consistency. It's they call it a dry mix, but it's not. It's a separate process. That will remain the same. The real change here is for the outdoor casting. What happens today is that dry materials are mixed together, and then they're transferred into a truck while they're still dry to be mixed and made wet into the traditional type concrete we're used to seeing that pours out of a truck. As you can imagine, it's difficult to pass dry materials into the back of one of those trucks without creating dust. And so, as you can see on the old site plan here in the blue, there's a dust hood and a dust collector, and a part of that process is to control that dust. The new machinery would eliminate those pieces of equipment because it would mix the material wet and then transfer it to the trucks for pouring when wet. Additionally, the trucks wouldn't have to do the mixing, and this also lends to what we typically see. You see a truck going down the road with its barrel turning slowly. That's not mixing, that's keeping the material from drying. When you are on site and they're mixing, the machines, the trucks have to turn the barrel very aggressively in multiple directions and back and forth through a whole cycle. It's very loud and it uses a lot of diesel fuel. And so that will be eliminated, and that really creates a benefit for not just the site, but the neighbors. So to go over the benefits quickly, on site, there's more safety because there's less manual manipulation, there's more automation. It's not automated in the sense that it will require less workers, but those workers will control the equipment at a control station rather than manually manipulating some of the equipment, and they don't have to contact the dry material as much. It's also more efficient and more redundant, so the applicant would like to see those improvements. As you can imagine, the workplace environment from the 1960s is much different than today. Off-site, we see environmental improvement, less diesel burned, cleaner energy, better dust control, and then the public benefit of less noise and better dust control. This application requires us to show that we're not increasing or expanding capacity and that we're not having any adverse impacts to the neighborhood. I won't belabor this point because it's overly technical, but the mixing capacity is reduced, and I could explain that like the way that the zoning hearing master went over, but really the mixing capacity doesn't affect the site capacity because these kilns here shown on the right, these are where the products are heat cast. These conveyor belts are where the empty casks are going back to be filled, and then underneath there and inside the building, they are heated and set. Those set the capacity of the site, and those are remaining unchanged. Those are part of the 2002 expansion, and nothing in this application affects the kiln process or the kilns themselves. Thus, capacity is not increased. So we also have the burden to show no significant adverse effects. The equipment is moved around on site, but the height of the silos remains the same. The equipment is largely the same, just with a different footprint. And there are benefits to the neighbors with less noise and dust, benefits to the general health and welfare with no diesel being used to mix, a more efficient and less dusty process, and then benefits to safety for the workers on site. In conclusion, we conducted public outreach. There were a number of questions at our neighborhood meeting and some phone calls. Once we explained the scope of the application, we didn't hear any opposition. EPC noted that the site doesn't have any environmentally sensitive lands and that the site is operating in compliance for 15 plus years. The staff report noted this is approvable, and the zoning hearing master found consistency with the comprehensive plan and development code, recommending approval, and we recommend the same of you and have the ability to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we will have, are there any opponents or proponents of this particular item? Not seeing anyone signed up.
There's no one in the audience.
And with that, I do not assume you need a rebuttal, so we'll move on to the Planning Commission staff.
Thank you. For the record, Melissa Leinhard, Planning Commission staff. The subject property is located within the residential 4 future land use category. The site is located in the rural area and also located within the limits of the Thonotosassa Community Plan. The proposed special use will not undermine the intent of the rural area policies of Objective 4 of the future land use element. While the site is an existing heavy industrial use in the rural area, it is recognized as a legal non-conforming use and is in proximity to compatible uses such as warehousing uses and the Taylor Road landfill across Mango Road. The proposed replacement of batch equipment will not increase the intensity of uses on site and will result in greater worker safety and will not result in any changes to the existing character of the surrounding area. The proposed special use meets the intent of future land use element Objective 9 and policies 9.1 and 9.2, which require that all development adhere to local, state, and federal land development regulations. Per policy 9.3, that recognizes the existence of continuation of legal nonconforming uses in the county, so long as they do not increase in intensity or negatively impact adjacent properties. The subject site currently manufactures concrete slabs that are used in the local building and development industry, and the proposed replacement of concrete batch equipment will not result in a greater intensity of uses on site. The proposed special use also meets the intent of the neighborhood protection policies under Objective 16 in the future land use element. Single-family residential dwellings and mobile home parks are located to the north, south, and west of the subject site. The proposed change of batch equipment will result in less noise, decreased use of fuel, and a decrease in the amount of dust generated as part of the regular manufacturing process, thereby resulting in improved air quality and the environmental standards for the surrounding area. The subject site meets the intent of the environmental goal of the Thonotosassa Community Plan, which is Goal 5, that seeks to preserve the environmental integrity of the area through incentives that balance private property rights. In this instance, the owner of the subject site is voluntarily seeking to update manufacturing equipment that would generate less noise and dust and use less fuel in the manufacturing operations, thereby resulting in improved air and environmental quality for the surrounding area. The proposed special use is also aligned with the comprehensive plan strategy outlined in the community plan that allows commercial uses along State Road 579, which is Mango Road, south of Pruitt Road to Interstate 4. And based upon those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed special use consistent with the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County, subject to the conditions proposed by Development Services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll hear from the zoning hearing master's summary.
The zoning hearing master found that the property that is the subject of the nonconformity special use permit consists of approximately 25.93 acres located southwest of County Road 579 and Thomas Road intersection in Seffner. The property is zoned AS1 and commercial general and is designated residential 4 on the future land use map. The property is within the boundaries of the Thonotosassa Community Plan within the rural service area. Surrounding land uses include agricultural, residential, industrial, and commercial uses, 200-acre landfill and community collection site owned by the county. Adjacent properties include single-family residential, agricultural, and vacant parcels zoned AS1 to the north, south, and west, and single-family residential and manufacturing parcels zoned AS1, RSC4, and PD to the east. The subject property is used for the manufacturing of precast and pre-stressed concrete products. The current zoning for the subject property does not permit the use. However, this use began when the property was zoned for manufacturing uses in the 1960s. The use has been determined to be a legal nonconforming use because the 1992 zoning conformance process downzoned the subject property. The property received legal nonconforming use status in 1997 under NCU 97-366. The property had received approval for expansion of the legal nonconforming use under special use 02389. The applicant is now requesting a nonconformity special use permit to allow the replacement of existing concrete batch equipment. The equipment replacement will not increase the square footage of the use or expand the nonconforming use area or intensity. The zoning hearing master found that there is no evidence in the record that the nonconformity special use permit to allow replacement of the existing concrete batch equipment, which will not increase the square footage of the use or expand the nonconforming use area or intensity, would result in a significant adverse effect on the nonconformity on adjacent properties, or rather of the nonconformity on adjacent properties. County staff has found the proposed special use permit approvable, subject to the conditions enumerated in the staff report based on the applicant's general site plan submitted March 28, 2022. As you've heard, Planning Commission staff has found the proposed nonconforming special use permit consistent with the future land use plan, subject to the conditions proposed by Development Services. The zoning hearing master concluded that the nonconformity special use permit is in compliance with and furthered the goals of the comprehensive plan, and this nonconformity special use permit to allow replacement of the existing concrete batch equipment that will not increase square footage or expand the use area or intensity is compatible with and approvable, compatible with the surrounding properties and approvable, and recommended that the board approved this application.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll open up for board discussion or consider motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Cohen, a second by Commissioner Smith. Not seeing any other discussion, please take a roll call vote.
Olbermann,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you very much. We are now at section G. This is a combined public hearing on DRI 220735 and the PRS 220429. And Mr. Grader, do you want to do development services summary?
Yes, again, Brian Grady, Development Services. As noted, we have related item G1A, which is an amendment to the Apollo Beach DRI, and G1B, which is a minor modification to the related plan development. That's PRS 22-0429. Michelle Heinrich with county staff will provide a brief overview of the two applications.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ms. Heinrich.
Good morning, Michelle Heinrich, Development Services. I'm just putting up a map overview of the subject area, and this summary covers both the PRS and the DRI application, which essentially are for the same request. And this does have to do with the Apollo Beach PD, which is PD 77-0123, as most recently modified by PRS 20-0384. This PD covers approximately 194 acres and permits both residential and non-residential uses in various pockets. The majority of the subject PD is also within DRI 59, which was most recently modified by DO Amendment 20-0385. For both applications, only pockets 106 and 107 are requested for modification. These pockets are located in the SMU 6 future land use category, the urban service area, and within the coastal high hazard area. Pocket 106 is approved for 265 multifamily units, and Pocket 107 is approved for 25 single-family attached units. This request is to add a second development option for these pockets to allow 23 single-family detached units in Pocket 106 and 21 single-family detached units in Pocket 107. As you can see on the map, these pockets are bordered by water bodies to the north and east. Property to the west is ELAP lands, and property to the south is within the same PD, which permits single-family attached, detached, and a yacht club development. The second development option will have a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet, which is the 6 unit per acre minimum lot size. Staff did not identify any compatibility concerns, and no objections from reviewing agencies were received. Therefore, we do recommend approval of both the DRI DO amendment and the PRS application. I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. And I'll open it up for board discussion, or would like to hear from the applicant.
Good morning, Cami Corbett with the law firm of Hill, Ward, Henderson, 101 East Kennedy Boulevard, Suite 3700. I do not have a separate presentation. I think this is a pretty straightforward request. We're asking for the second option to allow us the opportunity to do some large single-family detached product instead of the multifamily and attached product. And we would respectfully request your approval. And I'm here to answer any questions, as is Todd Amidon, our project engineer.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You do have 15 minutes, so you can continue if you'd like to, but are there any proponents or opponents present to speak to this item? I don't see any signed up.
No one in the room.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And do we want to move on to the development services recommendation, amended recommendations, if any?
Brian Grady, Development Services. We have nothing further to add, and we are recommending approval of both applications. Thank you.
Excellent. With that, I'll open it up for board discussion and or a motion on both G1A as well as G1B.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Cohen, as a second by Commissioner Smith. Not seeing any other discussion, please take a roll call vote.
Overman,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Excellent, thank you very much. I don't see any commissioner items, so we'll move on to the staff items.
The next item is agenda item I1, proposed land use meeting process, land development code amendments. Mr. Gormley will speak to this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. Item I1, Commissioners, are some proposed land development code amendments. We believe these are responsive to the board's direction at the April land use meeting regarding changes to the zoning process and changes to the structure of the zoning hearing master role in that process. What the board's direction was in April was essentially six elements. One was to maintain the ability to have a consent agenda for hearing rezoning applications. The second was to have the process change whereby the county commissioners would no longer be limited to the record established as the zoning hearing master and would be clearly the final decision makers and not responsive to the zoning hearing master as it's currently structured today. The zoning hearing master's role is desired to be clearly advisory in dealing with basic compliance matters. It would be to change the title of the zoning hearing master process to perhaps hearing examiner, and I'll just note that will largely be an administrative change. The code does refer to those people serving as the zoning hearing master as land use hearing officers. The other change directed was that the land use hearing officer be required to certify that they have no conflict on any case that they would be hearing, and finally to change the criteria of who could serve as a zoning hearing master to be limited to a planner or an attorney, and in this case we're recommending is a AICP certified planner. That's American Institute of Certified Planners. So what is before you today are some proposed amendments to Article 9 and 10 of the Land Development Code. I believe that effectuates that board direction. It does clearly provide that the board can consider applications as part of the consent agenda, and as we're recommending that be something that the criteria for the consent agenda be something memorialized in the board's rules of order that will provide some flexibility on that in the event that the board has future feelings on how the consent agenda should be structured. It does clarify that the board is reviewing the entire record of the zoning, and that the hearing master LUHO recommendation is simply a part of that record. It is no longer structured to be the recommendation to which the board is responsive. The hearing master's role, some of the powers and duties that are listed in the code are proposed to be amended to make it very clear that this hearing master's role is to hold hearings as directed by the code, or to effectuate any direction by the board. Some of the extraneous powers and duties in there, such as subpoenaing witnesses and calling for their own reports, is proposed to be struck to make that very clean for that role. The hearing master is proposed to today they're required to make findings of fact, conclusions of law, and a recommendation to the board. And so proposing to change that to remove any findings of fact, conclusions of law, or even recommendations, and to provide the board with written advice based on compliance matters and provide the basis for that advice. Finally, the duties of the hearing officer will be augmented to require an affirmative finding of no conflict of interest in any case that's assigned to them. That is something that currently in the code. We do have a provision that no hearing officer is to hear any case that they have a conflict on. But I believe that this will help put that on the front of the thought process each time the hearing officer gets cases assigned. What we're requesting is the board give us direction to include these amendments into the round 2 land development code amendments. That process would have these amendments considered by the board in a workshop on August the 10th. If the board so directs, we will hold outreach to engage any stakeholder input in advance of August 10th. So that when we come back to the board, we're able to share any feedback that we get as part of that process. This would culminate with public hearings on September 29th and October 20th for adoption of any code changes. That's a high-level view of the changes that we've brought before you today. Available for any questions or to expand on any element of this that would be beneficial to the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. Commissioner Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I think there's just been a lot of great work done by our board, as well as working together with the county staff to, take a look at these really old regulations and processes and determine how best to revise them to get better decisions out of the process, no matter who's sitting in these seats. And I just think there's been a lot of great work done by everyone involved, from legal to development services to us, I think, too, in all the workshops and discussions we've had together. I just have a couple of essentially grammatical suggestions. The first is, I can see the work that went into making it all gender neutral and saying, using their and them instead of he and his, is especially appropriate since both our land use hearing officers are female, and to make it to bring it in line with these sorts of changes we're doing throughout the county. But there's still quite a lot of that left. So example C3, it's during his term, it should be there. Example in section D, the land use hearing officer shall be compensated for his services. So it just needs another pass through to make it gender neutral, and I would make incorporate that hopefully into the motion to give the final direction. The other one is it really is a word change too, I think, to get us closer to this idea that the land use hearing officer should not be a third recommendation prior to the board, because in order to clarify the role of the LUHO as being advisory only and limited to basic compliance matters. Along with changing the title so it's not a master, and changing the role so he's not findings of facts, conclusions of law, or recommendations, I think the word advice and advisory still has the connotation of giving a recommendation. The danger with that is that, we have a finding of consistency from the Planning Commission. We have recommendation from all our staff. We have recommendations and comments from the school district, the Environmental Protection Commission, the transportation. We have plenty of recommendations and comments that come to us. If we have this extra appointed person that still is giving advice, I think that's too close to recommendations. And the problem is when we make a decision that's contrary to the advice, I mean, ask the county attorneys if they'd rather defend that in court when it's appealed with a land use hearing officer advice to, you know, go one way or another, or not. I mean, I think it's just easier to see that the buck stops here, that it's the elected officials making the decision, that we're not having any longer 2 hearings, each putting forth a separate verdict, but that we are just getting recommendations from, and then the land use hearing officer's role is to, you know, package up the relevant information, the evidence, the testimony, to allow public comment to be provided, and then, in my view, summarize it and package it up to give it to us, rather than giving advice, to provide a summary. And so that the recommendations and advice come only from the Planning Commission and county staff, and we don't have this extra high level of advice, but just someone taking it all together, packaging it up for us, and summarizing it, all the evidence and recommendations and comments. And so, because I think advice still has the land use hearing officer giving another opinion. And I think we want the role to be more administrative and less legislative, more packaging it up and giving a summary. And the role is to simplify our review, but not to add another review that might conflict with our review or that we might have to override. So I can see some discussion going on at the end of the dais, and maybe, what I'm inclined to do is ask for all the instances describing the land use hearing officer's role as advisory to a role of summarizing and packaging. And so just changing all occurrences of advice or advise or recommendation, if there's any of those left, to summary and summarize and provide a report, simply provide a report. Any thoughts on that?
Commissioner, we will take the direction the board has. What we were just discussing here is for the purposes of the consent agenda. Right now, we would have, if this is the direction the board would like to go, we will amend the language accordingly and modify other portions that would be necessary to make clear what the board would be acting on as part of a consent agenda. So if there's a board's will, we can certainly effectuate this. It might take a little bit of
Right. I think it could be just, limiting the, you would then have finding of consistency and a recommendation of approval from Development Services without that third thing. So I think the consent agenda could be based.
Yeah, we think, yes, certainly.
Yeah, could be based on that. And, the only other question I have, and so I'll make a motion, I'll be making a motion to provide that direction with those 2 notes. One last question I have was that H4 it says that the land use hearing officer, here, I'll read it to you. Whoever shall accept an appointment as a land use hearing officer in any firm which he or she may be associated is for a period of 1 year from the date of termination. as a holder of such office hereby expressly prohibited from acting as agent or attorney in any proceeding, application, or matter before any commission, board, agent, or other office of county government involving property which was the subject of an application during the time such person was in the office. So it says you've got a land use hearing officer, they quit or they're terminated. Now, for 1 year, neither they nor their firm can act as the agent or attorney in any proceeding coming before any commission or board or county government involving property that they already ruled on and were involved in as a zoning hearing master. And I think 1 year is a little short because, okay, they quit, something gets, their firm or themselves make an application. It takes almost a year before it's all going to come to us. So, I mean, I would like to hear from the board and from staff, but whether maybe 5 or 10 years, maybe 5 years would be more appropriate before the land use hearing officer could be coming back in front of the county commission with something they just were involved in, 12 months ago. I think I'll wait and see if there's any conversation on that before making the final motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Cohen, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I also want to compliment the staff on synthesizing all the discussions from our past workshops and also you, Commissioner Smith, because you've clearly, felt really strongly about making some of these changes that are needed after so many years. I want to talk about a couple of specific things because my understanding is we're going to send this language along and you're going to then take it out. We're going to have another workshop. You're going to hold public hearings and you're going to engage stakeholders in this. Yes. So let me address a couple of items. The first is on the role of the hearing officer, which I think is what your comments were directed at. The funny thing is that I was uncomfortable with the word advice, but I actually thought recommendation was better the more that I thought about it, because recommendation is just that. It's not a directive. And I think this board shows at every one of these meetings that when we feel that the land use hearing officers get it wrong, we have not been bashful about making a different decision. Now that may not have been the case in the past. I can't speak for before this last 18 months, but it seems to me that whichever way we go on this, the board has sort of staked out its role as the final arbiters in this matter. And, I do appreciate the findings from the hearing officers, and oftentimes by seeing their findings, it happened today, I actually disagreed with the factual element that led the hearing officer to a certain finding. I don't know if that hadn't been spelled out, if I would have been able to necessarily make the connection that I disagreed with it. But I think that this is a matter of language. And I think at the end of the day, we'll be able to come up with language that satisfies everybody. And ultimately, though, I think it's clear that the board makes these decisions. The one element I wanted to bring up was D2, and that is the cutoff of materials to the zoning administrator at 2 p.m. on the business day preceding the day of consideration by the board. I think that's probably too short. I think that should be lengthened a little bit. And I was going to suggest one of two options. One would be just to lengthen it. I think an applicant deserves at least a business day or two in full to respond to something prior to a hearing at the end. But what I was wondering, how long does it normally take between the zoning master report being issued and the final board hearing being scheduled?
It is probably around a month. There's generally about a 2-month difference between the hearing masters, I should tell you exactly, between the hearing masters hearing and the board hearing. And so the hearing master has 15 working days to
make the finding.
Yes.
Which will be which may be less cumbersome now, given where this is going. I want to suggest, and I'm not going to, I'll be happy to hear what the board has to say about this, but I'm going to suggest that a month or two is a long enough period of time that I don't think the cutoff should be on 2 o'clock the day before the hearing. I think even if it's, a couple of days, I'm wondering if maybe it ought to be calculated forward rather than backward. I'm wondering if maybe the calculation ought to be a certain number of days forward of when it comes down, like you have 30 days or something like that for anything written. But again, I think there's enough time to accommodate the needs of anybody that wants to insert additional evidence, but also to have time for the petitioner to respond to it. So those were just two comments that I wanted to make in advance of this. And my guess is that this will all be discussed as we workshop and have hearings on this. But other than that, I think that we're moving forward in a good direction, and I appreciate the staff and the board's work on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Cohen. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I think the work that's been done on this is just excellent and so needed to be done. I feel like this is, we have changed some things over the past few years that have made a difference, but we really needed to look this over so thoroughly. And I'd like to thank the staff. I mean, I think this was done so well and very thoughtfully, and I think it was done. We just looked at every element of it in a pretty thorough way. I'd like to also Commissioner Smith, you have just been amazing through this, just really thinking about it deeply and thoughtfully and how we proceed. And, all of this is important because this is the basis for how the county moves forward in the future. And it has not been good in the past. I think this process was... I can't believe it survived like it did for decades because this really, really needed to be done. There was a lot of effort and work and thought put into how we move this forward. And I know, Commissioner White, you've also been very concerned in seeing this as it moved forward, making sure that there was just, I'll say kind of just... due process and some, making a better process for making the best decisions that we can here. As to, I also felt uncomfortable with advisory, but as to, I'm not sure about summarize a recommendation. I, like Commissioner Cohen, kind of feel like recommendation is a less than advisory, I guess. Advisory seems like a stronger word to me than recommendation. And I hadn't thought of what else could replace it. So I'm just thinking summarize now, and that could, I think, also be, just kind of a review or a compilation of the record and with, what kind of the outstanding issues are could be another way. I hadn't thought about it being, I was trying to think of what else could be besides advisory, and recommendation just came to me as being a lower standard, actually, in my mind. Also, and I just think each one of these are just, I've been very concerned about the conflict of interest issues, and I think by just having those who are hearing examiners are held to a standard of, and I was assured that the planning rules the AICP has some standards with it that are similar to the standards that we have for lawyers. So that gave me a better sense of comfort with those two moving forward. As I had said before, the only other place apparently in the entire state of Florida that has this is Lee County, where they don't have the other recommendations and they only had lawyers. And I really think it's important that there is some kind of standard, because we haven't enforced any standard. I mean, even there could be very egregious behavior in the past, and there was nothing to be, to be hold accountability. I think I agree with Commissioner Smith. 1 year, in fact, 1 year in any issue that they've dealt with. But to me, it should. Is there any problem with making it just that if they have dealt with that issue as in the past? And I don't think this will be a difficult. I don't think we'll run into it a lot, I guess. But is there any difficulty with just saying that that would be a conflict of interest, period, for them to be involved in anything that they were involved in at the county and then come forward as a applicant's representative?
Commissioner, I believe that's the concern, or what's trying to be avoided. I would suggest that perhaps having a time without making a conclusion that it be something else helps keep that issue cleaner. I don't disagree with what you say, just from a structural standpoint, perhaps leaving that prohibition with maybe some predicate for the rationale behind that could expand on that.
I would definitely support 2 years. And it might even be kind of with representing anything. I mean, we have that for county commissioners with lobbying. And I just wonder on any issue, for 2 years. But certainly with any issue, I would say that they've been involved in. But I would just wonder, generally, it just seems like an easier rule. And I don't think it's incredibly oppressive or difficult to comply with, I would guess, as to that. And I also don't have issues with the month. I knew that there was quite a period of time before between the hearing master and the hearings usually. And so a few days, 2 p.m. Tuesday or 2 p.m. the day before, that's almost harder to keep track of than 2 days before. So, I mean, it just would seem more reasonable in terms of that. So I'll just, I guess, weigh in on those on those parts of the discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Kemp. Commissioner Myers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be brief. I don't support the 2 p.m. I think we should have at least a 24-hour notice. It just makes so much sense that if it's given a 24-hour notice, and that's the only comment that I have at this time. Thank you.
Okay, and we have Commissioner Smith. I did want to make a comment related to that. I do agree, I assume Commissioner Smith is going to make a motion. I do agree that taking the gender out of the issue is important. Making sure that we're addressing that there is a zoning hearing master that provides us with some comparisons. And I too agree that it's very, very helpful to read through the zoning hearing master's summary of findings and showing and pointing out maybe the differences between the applicant's steps as well as our zoning code, because that's where I've found there are opportunities for us to look at our zoning code to see if it's following or being consistent with where we're trying to grow and how we're trying to grow. It's one of the first hurdles, and give us some good guidance on where our land code might need to be amended in alignment with our comp plan or other growth goals. So I do like the idea of seeing a summary of findings and a comparison, but whether or not it needs to be a recommendation or advisory, I don't have a preference there. It's wise to get the summary of findings, and that person who is continually comparing the applicant's application and our code, a very valuable experience, and I'd like to see that continue. As far as having a professional that is in the land use business be prohibitive to work on anything that has to do with the industry for 2 years, that might be a little challenging for someone to be able to support themselves in the meantime. Whether or not it's an item that they have previously ruled on that seems reasonable, and the duration of greater than 1 year would seem appropriate, but I'm not going to make that particular decision. So with that, I'll call Commissioner Smith.
Oh, I had my hand up.
Okay.
Commissioner Cohen is ahead of me in line.
I apologize. I want to say this before you make your motion. I wanted to say something to what Commissioner Kemp you sparked this with me when you were talking about the conflict of interest issue, and Commissioner Overman just grazed it. There might need to be a distinction between a person and their firm, too. I don't know if it's fair to say that a person leaves as a land use hearing officer, goes to work for a firm, if their entire firm gets ruled out of doing anything in front of the county, it really could make it impossible for the person to make a living for a period of time. So I just think we need to be very specific about what it is that we prohibit and for how long and who's covered by it. And that little nuance gave me a little concern as you were talking about that. So
exactly. Commissioner Smith, I see Commissioner Kemp's hand raised. Okay, Commissioner Smith, you're recognized.
Okay. What a great discussion. I am just, I feel like we have a really good board here and good staff working together on this in such great ways. And I'll just say a few things. One, changing the wording as to what the LUHO does from recommendation to advice to report or comment. The point here was not to make sure that we're not impeded, because it has in the past been used as an excuse for other boards to find one way or the other. And this is not that kind of board. But my bigger concern is how, if we do disagree with that officer, how it then might impact and interfere with our ability to defend the board's finding in court on an appeal. So I think, our direction, did you have anything to say about that?
I did. I wanted to just to help the board. This has been a very good discussion, and I think there's really a matter of, is the board's desire to have something from the land use hearing officer, be it recommendation, advice, and putting the court piece aside, is just if the board would like to get that from the land use hearing officer, we can certainly add strengthening language here to make it explicitly clear of what that recommendation or finding or advice is and is not. So I think that the intent of this, the way this was structured, is to have that LUHO, what comes out of the LUHO, be another piece of the record that the board considers. But we could make that, and language suggesting otherwise is struck. But we can always add, flashing light, notice of this shall be this and it shall not be that. So for purposes of protecting the record for any future litigation or any to resolve any ambiguities of what the weight of that recommendation is in these proceedings, we can certainly augment the language with very explicit language along that.
That certainly, I think we've got consensus for that it should be clear moving forward, whether it's this board or the next board or the next board, that it's the elected officials whose decision is final, and that needs to be more clear than it's ever been. Me personally, I just don't think that the person we appoint in this role has any more to add than our EPC, our own transportation engineers, our planning commission staff, and our development services staff. So setting them up as this extra opinion is something that I'm not comfortable even giving that weight to in the matters that come to the board. But happy to at least make the forward motion of getting them out of the way of an extra recommendation that is balanced against the board in outside of here as it goes forward, and making it clear to everyone, to the citizens, to the applicants, because so often we have applicants come and say, you've got 3 recommendations of approval, you have nothing else to do but go along with it. Making it clear to everybody from here on out, it's the elected officials who actually make the decision. So I think that still needs a little wordsmithing, and I do think we have consensus on making it clear that the board is the final decision, and everything that comes to us. Frankly, if it was just the land use hearing officer makes a summary, compiles the case, determines what's relevant, packages it up, and hands it to the board, if I was making a summary, it would clearly have my thumbprint on it. And if compared to some other land use attorney, if they were making the summary, it would not be, there's no way not to be a little subjective in that role as what you present to the board. So you're always going to have that. I'm not worried that you won't have that. But I think you've got enough direction to move forward with something that lowers that authority and lowers that voice in the process. The length of time for citizens to prevent documentation. We had, and I agree, 2 p.m. the day before is short. It's short for us to have something in the case file to look at and review. Frankly, as a citizen coming to the boards, I always tried to get my information in early so the staff would have a chance to consider it, and my images and everything in early so the LUHO would have a chance to consider it. I think the citizens are at an advantage that way. But why it came up is that time and time again, we had, what happens is the first hearing is months, and sometimes more than 1 month. It gets continued, the applicant decides to continue or something before it even gets here. It can be 6 months before it even gets to the board. And if you've tied up the deadline with the back end, then a citizen or something that you read in the newspaper or things couldn't be brought forward. So we were trying to say, you weren't limited to that record, and new information could come forward, a new study or a flood event or something, so that we could consider that even if it was sooner, closer to the board hearing. But I agree that 2 p.m. the day prior could lead to a whole lot of gotcha and stuff that we can't consider. So, maybe the answer is that somebody can talk about, and I thought I saw that in this place about the open record period. You know, people can comment on anything, and so they wouldn't be limited to the record, and they could talk to us about anything. But if you wanted to provide pictures or maps or newspaper articles or anything like that, it would have to be earlier. Am I correct about that?
The way it was structured is to have a time for documentary evidence information to be provided, and then no limitation on the board, what can be presented to the board. You know, I think if I'm understanding what you're describing correctly, it would be, and by the way, it did 2 p.m. just to be, that's
Sure.
about the latest that we could effectively get that information extracted and brought to the board. So certainly take you know, any time earlier than that. You know, 2 p.m. was about as far as we could comfortably commit to reliably doing. So this conversation is very helpful for that perspective. But in terms of documentary evidence, is what you're describing, the intent is that people could come and speak at the hearing, but if they want to submit documentary evidence, make it clear that that needs to be submitted in advance if it's post the zoning hearing master hearing. And if that could certainly clarify that to make that
Yes, and I
distinction.
think, I mean, when we have a lot of what comes up before us, a PRS, for example, people can come right in and talk about anything right then and there because there wasn't a prior hearing. Right. And it hasn't led to terrible problems. And stuff that's on our regular board agenda, somebody can come in at public comment and tell us something that day. So I think, in the way I was reading this, people can talk about anything they want to in public comment, but documentary evidence for all of us to consider, applicant and us and the public, to know what's in the case file. You know, I'd listen to what the stakeholders also have to say. Personally, I mean, I'd go to 24 hours, as Commissioner Meyer said. I'd go to 48 or 72 hours for documentary evidence, if that's what the consensus ends up being. So leaving that all a little open for future consideration and stakeholder discussion and workshop. And the final point was the length of time for the LUHO to be able to lobby. We put a limit on county commissioners of 2 years, as Commissioner Kemp said. So, but we don't limit their firm or their associates or whatever. So maybe something closer to what the commissioners are restricted to would make sense for a land use hearing officer as well. And with all those places of things, there's an awful lot of great stuff in here. With all those little places that still need to be worked on, given the feedback of the board and taking it out to the stakeholders, I think we have enough board direction to move forward with all that considered. So I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by
Second.
Commissioner Smith, a second by Commissioner Kemp. Commissioner Kemp, you have your hand raised?
Yes. And the great discussion. I think, again, just in the beginning statement that Commissioner Smith made, and I appreciate Mr. Gormley said strengthening that language. I think it does. I think it's really critical with all the lawsuits that we have that we make certain, especially, I mean, I couldn't believe that we had a zoning hearing master who believed, and there was confusion about it. To me, it was shocking that they would be a final arbiter with more, somehow more say than the Board of County Commissioners that are elected by the, citizens of this county in terms of that. I think that is really important to strengthen that language. And actually, it made me think a little more about your use of the word summarize, which I think I'm getting more of a comfort level, summarize, compile, like I said, or I'm not sure if there's another word, but the reason being that if you have 3 recommendations, like you say, and you're also giving, like, they're all like equal weight, but we have, in particular, Planning Commission, that's a institutional, professional staff that spends all their professional time reviewing and being just deeply steeped in all of this, both academically, by license, and by profession. The same is true of or Planning Commission staff. I don't know if I said Planning Commission or Development Services, but Development Services certainly completely that. Planning Commission, as far as the staff recommendation goes, which I would think would be influential with planning commissioners, but they also have that, and I think that those things deserve more weight and have a different level, meet a different level than the zoning hearing master, hearing examiner, the person who does this, compiles this record. I just think it would be not respecting the depth of that by having those recommendations be kind of an equal status of some sort. So I'll just throw that into the discussion, because I think that's really, really significant and important in terms of what comes forward. And that's not to say that there's not great review now, and that we have good professionals doing this, but I think there is a different weight that comes with and also the Planning Commission and Development Services, which are planning staff that hear from this board all the time, and where we are with that. So I think that's important.
Thank you. But before I call on Commissioner Cohen, I want to make a little bit of clarification. We were talking about the deadline for information. Logistically, we meet on Tuesdays. And having a full business day means, do we get it before 9 o'clock on a Monday, or does it come in on Friday? Is the agenda published enough that individuals can see all of the backup that's been submitted so far by Friday? So I'm sure staff will come back with some recommendations, but in order to make sure all parties have an opportunity to review the materials prior, including us, the board, taking a look at it, given the fact that we have our meeting typically the second business day of the week, I think it would be important to get some recommendations on how would it go about doing that. Commissioner Cohen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. I want to just, Commissioner Kemp, I want to just follow up on your comments about the role of the staff, because as I'm thinking about this 2 p.m. deadline issue, normally we have our briefings with the staff about a week before the hearing, give or take. That briefing is so important, I know, to me, because that's where we really have a chance to discuss the issues that are involved in each of these cases. And for the public, they don't see us necessarily doing that, but a lot of our unanimous votes that take place around here, or even our not unanimous votes, take place, the quick ones, because we've all done our homework before and we come in with the information. It is very frustrating to me, after we've had that meeting, if additional very relevant information comes in, not because I'm not capable of reading it and figuring out what it says, but it may change the staff's opinion of the issues that are involved in the application. So I'm not going to asked to modify the motion in any way, but I think as we're considering these issues, I hope that you'll keep in mind that our ability to have a complete record when we're meeting with you helps us do a better job. And if that record gets changed considerably after our meeting, it really is not good for anybody. It's not good for the public. It's not good for the applicant. It's not good for us as decision makers because we're flying blind a little bit. So when you're considering that deadline, maybe that can be sort of thought about as you're figuring out where the proper place for that is. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cohen. That's kind of where I was going. Typically, I get my briefings on the Thursday before Tuesday, and it's really nice to have all the information available, not only for us, but also for the staff, and I'm sure for the applicant as well as the public. So, Commissioner Kemp, your hands up. Nope. Okay. So, Commissioner Smith, you made a motion?
Yes, and I think we have
I'd like to restate
enough.
it to make it a little clear for the clerk, please.
Well, it is a little bit, there is still a little bit of work left to do, so it's not cut and dried, but I think we have a lot of consensus here that we still need to work on the role of the LUHO to make sure it's clear that the board is the final decision. I totally agree with Commissioner Kemp's saying, you know, we get, and as I said, we have really good recommendations from our own engineers and everything to consider. So we want to make sure we're not putting this LUHO decision above any of our professional recommendations that come to us, because, I mean, think about it. The LUHO is appointed by us to sort of gather this material together. So I think we're clear on that role to be a little bit fine-tuned, as well as the length of the time citizens would be allowed to comment on anything, but documentary evidence would need to be provided in as close to the hearing as possible, that's still allowed for thorough review, at least by the board and the applicant, and then a little bit of changing to that 2-year criterion for the land use hearing officer to stay out of the lobbying business, and with, you know, and the, well, of course, gender neutral language needs to be gone over a little bit more, but that, along with everything else that the staff has put together here, is where we're headed for the next round of stakeholder, just to take all that out to the next round of stakeholder meetings and bring back to workshop.
Seconded. It was already seconded.
Sorry, you couldn't hear me. My apologies. I didn't unmute. So we have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please take a roll call?
Overman?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're getting very close to 12, but we only have one item remaining. So I will continue on.
The next item is Brian Grady Development Services. The next item is item I2. It's approved to the agenda item to approve the Florida Department of Transportation and Public Transportation grant agreement for the Intercity Cross Bay Ferry. I believe Tom Fass with Facilities Management and Real Estate Services will speak to this item. Thank you.
Mr. Fass, you're recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners. Tom Fass, Hillsborough County. Staff is recommending approval of a grant agreement with FDOT and a resolution authorizing the chair to execute the agreement in order to receive funding total of $518,000 over the next 3 years, which will go towards the subsidy of the Intercity Ferry service. I should note that we elected to bring this to the land use meeting to ensure that if there were concerns or questions, we had another meeting prior to the FDOT suspense of June 17th to submit the agreement. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fass. I'm I'm not seeing any public commenters signing up for this. Is communications, have you gotten any additional public comment for this particular item? That I don't see.
There is no one in the audience wishing to speak.
Excellent, thank you very much. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve this. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Fass. I know he's worked diligently and hard on doing this, and it's been a tough job. So thank you very much for your work in this. And again, I have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kemp, a second by Commissioner Smith. I too want to say thank you very much to Mr. Fass, as well as the entire team that's been working on this. It's an incredibly important process, especially when grant funds are in the mix, that we make sure that we move forward on this. I'm not seeing any other hands. Commissioner Kemp, yours is up, or is that from before? Okay, excellent. With that, clerk, please do roll call.
Silverman?
Yes.
Cullen?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Kemp?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other items on the agenda.
Madam Chair, before you adjourn, could I make a point?
Yes, ma'am.
Very quickly. I just noticed on this agenda, it just as kind of, what I want to do is suggest a future item. Because on this agenda, item A5, for example, is a PRS, which was continued. But it's a PRS for Cross Creek, and it was just to formally zone it as a park. But you wouldn't know it's a county property if you look at it, because the applicant is an Earthel Hill, who is a county staff member. And I've seen this before. There was even the Kennan property we were discussing recently. The applicant in the old zoning was was a land use attorney, and so. But when we get land use items application from the school board, it's clear that it's the school district making that application. And so I'd just like to make a suggestion for a future item to do whatever change we'd need to do to consider, or else you can discuss with me later about why it's not possible to consider having the applicant be more obviously the county when things are coming. Yeah, I've seen this with ELAP properties as well. So, yeah.
And Commissioner, we could certainly do that very easily, identify where it's county properties. What we typically list on the agenda is who the application designates as the applicant. So we have the property owner sign authorization that designates either themselves, or either they sign it themselves or they designate somebody to act as the applicant. And that designated applicant, or they can designate an applicant's representative. Either one of those is who we typically list. However, to your point, if the applicant is the county or any other public agency, if the board would like, we'll include that information on the agenda as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would see that as being a great opportunity to make sure we're aware. Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you. I would think we could just set a board policy that would just say that the applicant has to be the applicable county department when it's a piece of Hillsborough County property. That's what I'd like to see.
Mr. Gormley?
We certainly can follow that and follow up to memorialize that as appropriate. Understanding that is that it would the applicant would need to be listed as the county property, whether they as the county department, whether they retain the services or assisted by other outside folks. It would still be that county department is the listed applicant on any application the board signs, or that the county signs, certainly.
Mr. White, does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay, excellent. Mr. Smith, you're recognized. Oh, your hand's coming down. Okay. All right. Seeing no other comments or future business items, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.